an academic or you're a regular guy. We have to
Frontline
be fearless.
TV.com.
Dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach.
Brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach live on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Today, we have Paul Chiacha from the Angry Catholic setting in for Joe Pasillo. Joe Pasillo is at Lake Havasu in Arizona. It's far cry from Seaside Heights, New Jersey, but I'm sure he's having a good time. And Paul, who's a good friend of our of the show, he's been on with Joe and I a number of times. He's with the Angry Catholic. Paul and I have a lot of things in common, one of which we're Italian. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have tons of kids. Paul has 7 kids. I have 5 kids. And the third thing, we have Scranton in common. Paul is from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I went to the University of Scranton. And the first person we're going to be talking about tonight is Joe Biden, who claims to be from Scranton, Paul. Paul, I mean, Joe, I think he was there for like 3 days and then he moved to Delaware. So, I mean, we'll give him the Scranton cue. But first of all, it's good to have you here, Paul. And what's it called? I look forward to a very good conversation. So what's been going on at the Angry Catholic?
Well, we recently, I mean, we stay incredibly busy with that. You can't imagine the amount of stories, and unfortunately most of them are not good stories. So we're kind of inundated with stories and just trying to help get the word out and share what we know to the greater Catholic or greater community. But we've taken on a new project. We've been asked by the Wanderer newspaper, who's been around over 155 years, faithful to the magisterium of the church, and we're producing now a news program. So that's keeping us pretty busy. It's a weekly 15-minute commentary, a little bit of commentary, and the content of the Wanderer that we produce each week.
Outstanding. I'm familiar with the Wanderer and what's his name?
Joe Matt.
There we go.
Yeah.
Definitely, very, like you said, it's been around for a long time, and that is awesome. So let's jump into Mr. Biden. On June 15th, the White House released a statement saying President Biden is issuing an executive order seeking to ban conversion therapy, the practice that allows someone who has transitioned to the opposite sex to reverse the process. He is putting the Department of Health and Human Services in charge of the policy. Okay, for all those who don't know what conversion therapy is, it basically is a psychological process that you talk to someone who is living a homosexual lifestyle, trying to get at the root of why they're living that lifestyle. A friend of our show, as well as the Angry Catholic, is Joseph Chiambra. He has spoke extensively on his lifestyle. He lived the homosexual lifestyle for quite some time. He's no longer living it. But he said that the reason why he was living it is because of a wound he had. He had a difficult relationship with his father. We also spoke recently with a gentleman, A.J. Benjamin, who wrote a similar book to Joseph Chiambra's book, and he said the same thing. So basically, you have to ask yourself, Paul, like, what is the problem? Like, why can't a person, like, because there are people who say this, they say, listen, I have had an issue, or I've said I've been molested, say, by a man, and then therefore, as a result, I've lived the lifestyle as a homosexual, an active homosexual. Why can't a person explore this? And clearly the reason why is because Joe Biden is controlled by the LGBT lobby, and he is simply like a talking head for them. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, I think about this and I say it's very sad.
Well, I think one of the, I guess maybe it's on the solution side is, but we don't have these conversations in our communities. It's like it's a taboo subject, so we can't even discuss this in an open format logically. And when you do, if it's somebody that's hardcore in that camp, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to listen to actual facts, because it seemed to me, as I was reading about this topic before we came on, that the statistics and what was being presented for this executive order, and in one of the articles I know on like Catholic League, they weren't true. They weren't accurate information. I mean, there's much harm that can be done by some of the things, because basically I see it as this ban for conversion therapy is basically just shutting the door on the argument, if that makes sense.
No, it is. And what it is, I think it buys into what the culture is saying is you're born that way. Like there is no scientific proof that you are born that way. I invite any person who disagrees with this conversation to send me an email and show me the science. You always say the science, the science, the science, it's a science. Well, there is no science.
Sure.
And here's another thing that's underlying this that no one talks about. To live an active homosexual life is a sin. It's a mortal sin. We've lost the sense of mortal sin in society, and it's been mainstreamed, just like to be divorced and to get remarried. That's completely acceptable in Western civilization. If your marriage, and again, many marriages, in fairness, are not sacramental. That's why, frankly, a lot of times people can get an annulment because the marriage wasn't sacramental to begin with. But
Mhm.
even still, if you divorce your wife and remarry and you don't get an annulment, meaning the marriage wasn't sacramental, you're living in a state of mortal sin. Well, this is a worse sin because it's a sin that cries out for vengeance for God. That's in the Bible. That's not my words. It also goes against nature. But at the end of the day, we've lost that sense. And here's the thing, and Joseph Chiamber will verify it. If you want to read his book, I always plug it. I think it's Disordered. Get his book. Also, A.J. Benjamin's book. Get his book, When the Sun Frees You. It talks about wounds, as in people who live. A.J. Benjamin never lived the lifestyle, but he had that attraction. Joseph did. But it talks about wounds, as in why I have this. And here's the deal. Why can't you speak to someone to address those wounds? And then, to be honest with you, you will be free. You will not go down that road. And ultimately, you will not live in a state of mortal sin. Because at the end of the day, if you die in mortal sin, you don't go to heaven.
Sure. And one of the I guess I tend frequently to go back to the idea that as the church goes the nation, or goes the society, or goes your community. And when our church as a whole and the leadership of our church won't address these issues and come out concretely, and they allow, I don't call them dissident priests, to go around preaching things and talking about things that blur that line that's actually in the church, it's very clear. That's, we're going to have problems with that, because it just like I said, it shuts down the argument.
You're 100% right. It's funny you say that because I forget who we interviewed who said this, but they said America is strong as the Catholic Church is strong. And the Catholic Church is very weak now. And that's from the laity up the line. It's very weak. Now, are there good parishes? Absolutely. Are there good bishops? Yes, there are. Are there good priests? Yes. But as a whole, it's weak. It is weak. And frankly, you are 100% right, Paul. I'll be honest with you. Listen, the church has to go in the breach. That the Catholic faithful have to go in the breach. We have to make it clear that certain things, frankly, first of all, in our own life, but in the public square, are not okay. We have to. We have to. Because again, society is very confused. And here's the deal. Not only is it confused, it's bearing bad fruit. It simply is bearing bad fruit. You look around. I always say this, the greatest poll is to look out your window. And I always say this to people, is it working? Has the sexual revolution worked for America? Broken families, wounded children. It simply does not work. And this is another nail in the coffin. It's another nail in the coffin. And the church should speak out more strongly, but it doesn't. And frankly, so should people. You know, it's just become, again, it's mainstreamed. It's mainstreamed. You can't say to people in polite company, I just believe in traditional marriage. Go to any like party. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I know, Paul, your wife went to Villanova. I went to Scranton University. I say that because, like, go to an alumni event. They're both Catholic universities. An alumni event, a lot of those people are successful, quote unquote, people. If you say in one of those parties, yeah, I believe in traditional marriage. I don't hate anybody. I will respect everybody. I will not discriminate against anybody, but I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. You're shunned.
Sure. Now, well, just the one thing you just said is, are they really Catholic universities?
Well, you know, one could say, I'll tell you, I mean, I would not send my kids to the University of Scranton. I will say that. What I will say is this. I mean, when I went to Scranton, I graduated in 92. Were there, like, I know a friar, Father Felix, who went there, who's a priest now, and he invited one of the Jesuits to his, I didn't know him, Father Lally, I think his name was, I believe, because I wasn't really a practicing Catholic when I went there. I went to church. I'm surprised I wasn't struck by lightning, in all honesty. But at the same time, um, like, there is pockets, but if I'm going to spend money like that, like to go to Scranton or Villanova, I'm not like your kid. It could do just as well going to Rutgers from a New Jersey perspective. That's the thing. I mean, I'm not bashing. I don't want to bash them, but what I will say is you're not for the money. Like if you told me like Rutgers cost 30 grand, Scranton cost 60 grand. What if someone said, well, it's really Catholic, like say it was Christendom College, I'd say, well, it's worth it. My kid's going to go, my kid's going to learn something. My kid's going to get formed.
Well, and I
That's
think
really not the case. And again, the church has to speak out more, but frankly, that begins in families too. I mean, how many Catholic families are cool with like their sons living with their girlfriend? Like that's just commonplace, and it's just we have just the doors have been blown open, and no one cares. No one cares, and it goes back to again to get back on topic with this therapy. Why can't a person investigate a wound? Say a person, I'll use an extreme, was molested, and they're wounded. A lot of people who live gay lifestyles, by the way, have been sexually abused. Why can't you explore that wound and point to that as the reason why you're living a gay lifestyle and potentially heal from that wound and not do it? Because society will not say it's wrong. You see, it comes down to that. Society will not say that living a homosexual lifestyle is wrong when it is biblical. It's not just Catholics, it's all Christians. Christians, it's in the book of Leviticus. You can't get around it. It's in the Bible, and Catholic teaching has spoke on it for centuries, but they refuse to say it because, again, you don't get invited to the barbecue when you say that one.
yeah, yeah. And one thing that I honestly don't think people even understand in regarding, so kind of take it back to the government and our society as a whole, is even our governmental structure right from the beginning. And I think I think it was John Adams that made this crystal clear that our constitution, our structure of government is only good and only works in a moral society. So that's where the church comes in, because there really isn't that that moral standard anymore, other than the Catholic Church and really in this country, kind of what's for argument purpose, for what's left in the Catholic Church as far as orthodoxy and solid Catholic teaching. That's all that's left. There, any other organization has already, fallen to this and has been shut down to even open this conversation up. So it makes it very difficult when the president says, no conversion therapy. Well, where's that moral standard to have that argument? It's just really, it's just our voices have been silenced.
You're 100% right. And I think that's one of the mistakes of this secular culture. You can't legislate morality. I mean, we've talked about this, Joe and I, time and time again. Churches and in families instill that in society. They instill that. I mean, I clearly believe the Catholic Church is the church, but we'll just pick a church. I'm just going to pick one out of the hat. The Methodists. There's kernels of truth being spoken
Sure.
from the pulpit in the Methodist Church. And to be honest with you, a good society lets religion flourish. All religions, because God does not impose himself, he proposes. And we're not looking for a theocracy. I'm not looking to impose my religion on anyone. God doesn't even do that. But all religions have in, like, they could say something like, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. That's a good thing. I'm all
Sure.
about that. Great. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder on that idea. Wonderful. You can't legislate that. You learn things from your home. And here's another thing. You talk about like the church instilling values and instilling guidance into people. Ultimately, good marriages need God. You need God in a marriage. I've said this too on this show, Paul, and I'll be honest with you. I don't even believe in civil marriage. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because we're all so flawed.
Yeah.
We are flawed people. God came to save us from ourselves, and marriage needs God, and it guides the family. It guides the family. And then you have Joe Biden. Here he is, Joe Biden on CNN. He states this, that 8-year-olds, he said this, these are not my words, 8-year-olds he supports can change their sex. And here's the funny part about it. This is an administration that talks about science, science, science. Studies from Vanderbilt University and London's Portman Clinic found that 70 to 80% of children who express interest in changing their sexuality, they change their mind as time moves on. Also, Paul McHugh on Johns Hopkins University has said the same thing. Now, here you have the president listening to the woke culture, supporting a child who will change their sex. Now, the bottom line is this. You do that, Paul. I have kids. You can't change back. You're scarring yourself. And people are cool with this. I mean, like, let's be real. You're cool with this?
But that's the fallacy that comes out when things like this are proposed or, put in as an executive order. The facts just aren't there. A lot of this stuff, and I even learned more about it because we were going to talk about it. Some of these statistics were scary. I mean, some of this stuff is permanent with the puberty blockers, and definitely when when you go into surgery, it's permanent. You can't turn that around. There's no coming back from that. And some people people are suffering dearly. But I wanted to make a point that, Joe, my vet won't spay my dog until she goes through heat, and they recommended twice because that's going through, as best I know it, is through puberty, because it's not healthy for my dog. And you're going to let young, I guess older children or young adults go through this. It's awful, just awful. My pet is treated better, and they're looking, as a society, they care more about the health of my pet than my children.
No, that's a great example. I'll be honest with you. I can't believe that an educated man or woman is going to look into the face of a 10-year-old and try to convince them or assure them that they could change their sex. I'll be honest with you, Paul, I'll be truthful with you. We're in the twilight zone.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond like where people are like, oh, you're this or you're a bigot. No, No, this goes against science. When you tell me that Vanderbilt University is telling you a statistic, 70 to 80% of kids, now how hard it is to get in Vanderbilt University. These are brilliant people. They're telling you that 70 to 80% of the children who have these ideas change their mind in time.
Yep.
And you're going to buck that because Rachel Maddow tells you differently? Because the woke culture tells you differently? You're okay with that? And here's the thing, this is what's going on in public school. And it's not like years ago when I was a kid, it was always like, oh, it was that public school. That school's bad, or they're poor and they go to this school. And somehow, if you're in the middle class or in the upper middle class, or if you're wealthy, you're in a better school. The better school districts are worse. They've embraced this completely. And it's an indoctrination. It is, period. End of story. And here's the thing, Paul. You're Catholic. I'm Catholic. Not everyone has money to send their kids to Catholic school. It's expensive to send your kids to Catholic school, period. I mean, a lot of people have like 2 kids or 3 kids. You have 5 kids. You have 7 kids. You have 8 kids. Those tuition bills are off the charts. Why should I, who pay taxes, have to subject my children? I don't believe in this. How about we just become agnostic? Teach your subject. You teach math, just teach math. You teach English, just teach English.
Joe, University of Scranton, just as an example, they have drag queen karaoke. And this is just one little example just to show you. And that's, I guess my opinion is, and this definitely won't be a popular one, is I would say a Catholic education, other than a few, because there are a few good, solid Catholic schools. There's no doubt about it. So if you take them out of the mix, but the far majority of them, I think it's far worse to send your kids now to a Catholic school with an example as, oh, we're going to have drag queen karaoke, just as an example, drag queen story hours. And it's catching on all over the country. But I think it's far worse to send our students to a Catholic school, and that's even primary and high school and college, with the expectation, because the parents, I think, they mean well. They think they're sending their kids and paying all this money to get an education that's through a Catholic lens, right? That's what you pay for. But to have that expectation, and to have you, and I've seen it because I went to a Catholic high school. I spent some time at a Catholic college, or so-called Catholic college. And it's far, far worse to have this example opposite of what it's supposed to be than at least at a public school, high school, middle school, college. There's no expectation there that you are going to learn your Catholic faith there. So at least that's very clear. So the parent, the kids, they know, okay, we're going to have to do this on our own. We're going to have to instill those values on our own. And I just think it's far, far worse. And it leads to a Joe Biden doing things like he's doing with his executive order, because I bet if you polled half the Catholic schools in America, at least, I bet half or more of the people would be absolutely fine with that.
Well, again, I think a lot of people go to Catholic school because they're looking for achievers. I mean, you see that in a lot of schools, because a lot of the Catholic schools, kids, like we'll use an example, Scranton Prep, and I have no insight into Scranton Prep, but I know it's a good school, and there's schools near me: Bergen Catholic, Don Bosco, St. Peter's Prep. They're good schools, academically speaking.
Academically, yeah, I would agree with that.
And people want their kid to go there because they can get into good colleges, and that's the primary driver. I mean, there are good schools. My kids go to Catholic school. I haven't seen anything like overtly, they're not learning the Summa, but at the same time, it's a nurturing place. The people are good, and frankly, I'm pretty satisfied with it. I'm not looking for the perfect, but to your point, I don't want a drag queen hour. I mean, I would be very, very upset if I saw that. And frankly, that goes against what the mandate of what a Catholic education is. And that's not like, I'm not trying to sound like Archie Bunker, but let's be honest, that's not what a Catholic education is about.
Sure.
And
Joe,
it's just sad.
I wouldn't even have a problem. Like, we've had schools in our area, we're in the Diocese of Scranton, where they've had someone come in and speak like a Father Martin, right? And I know you've probably talked about him on your
Sure.
show. We've talked about him on our shows, and I'm one personally. Bring him in, let him talk. But then the bishop should be there also to be able to engage Father Martin because isn't that what college is for? Or isn't that what education is for, right? Bring him in. Let's have that talk. Let's see where he divides from church teaching. And let's have that discussion. So when you present the facts and the teaching of the magisterium of the church, all the the saints have talked about this stuff, but that doesn't happen. A speaker like him, and there's others, many others, is allowed to come in and speak, and nothing is said.
No, I agree. Father Martin is very good at, like, he doesn't paint the whole picture. I mean, frankly, you have to paint the whole picture.
Sure.
Ambiguity leads to trouble. I mean, um, it's a shame because, again, to affirm someone in a sinful lifestyle leads to hell. I mean, it comes right down to that. We're not helping. And that, listen, the government's job isn't to guide people to heaven or hell, but the government's job is also to get out of people's lives, particularly people of faith, just like I can't impose my faith on, say, a secular family. I have no right to. That's your business. If you don't want to raise your kids with a God or belief, that's your business. But you have an ideology and you're teaching my kid that ideology, and I pay taxes too. I should not have to have my child subjected in public school on Main Street. You name the town, you name the state. That should not be the case. You always say, oh, you have an ideology. Well, actually, I do, but I'm prevented from having that in the school. Well, you're giving your ideology to my kid. And
Yep.
the president, if you ask me, is getting into an arena he should have no business being in.
And
That's no business. He's just speaking to this. I mean, it's a loser in terms of, I'll be honest with you. If you ask me, they've overstepped their boundaries and they're going to get crushed because of it. Crushed. When you're telling me boys could play in girls' sports and a 14-year-old boy could shower with a 14-year-old. I mean, it's like, really? I mean, it's just crazy. It's gone completely off the rails. But Biden, to be honest with you, he's defying science. Vanderbilt says otherwise. Johns Hopkins says otherwise. And frankly, I think it's a loser. I want to go to New Jersey because, of course, I live in New Jersey, and there's a congressman there, Tom Malinkowski. He's a Democrat, and he's basically getting in parents' faces, and he refuses to meet with them because of their defense of inappropriate sexual instruction going on in high school. Now, just for the record, these parents aren't complaining about discussions of the birds and the bees. Instead, they were complaining about inviting young boys and girls to question their sexual identity. These are by adults. They also registered objections over showing them graphic depictions of men having sex with men. This is in school. And if you object or criticize to these pornographic exercises, it's incomprehensible. I mean, this is, again, why should my kid have to see this? You know, a lot of times people like criticize DeSantis, and they said he's homophobic. Like he said that there should be no sexual education for kids from, I believe it's pre-K to 9 years old. They don't talk about that, the press. They kind of leave that out. Kids who are 9, I have an 8-year-old daughter. They don't even know where puppies come from. And you're going to show an 8-year-old, boy or girl, graphic sexual pictures? Get the hell out of here. I'll be honest with you. I don't care if the kid's in 11th grade. It's not your business. It's simply not your business. I'll say this again. I pay taxes too. And I'm not interested in your ideology. I'm sorry. It should be, at the most, it should be agnostic, Paul. Agnostic. Just teach the subject. That's all.
Yeah, I honestly, I with this one, I don't even know where to start. This is so awful. First to your point, why are these teachers teaching anything other than their subject matter is beyond me to begin with. I don't need them to be a parent. I need them to be the teacher of that subject matter, and that's really what they're there for. And it's so outrageous that they're offering. I made a couple notes here. You know, they're teaching instructing sexuality to young students that entice them to consider whether they were I mean, this is outrageous. Satisfied with being a boy or a girl, and if not, they were asked to consider whether switching to the opposite sex. I mean, just so you know, I mean, you know this. I've been immersed in the abuse of what has gone on in the church for about 3.5 years now. I'm telling you, this is grooming behavior.
No
They are
question about it.
there's no doubt. I mean, they're the teachers are interfering with that natural instinct. They're circumventing what parents want, and they're literally manipulating these children to think about things that this should not even be on their radar. And I actually did a news story on this for the Wanderer. I think it was like a week or two ago. There's actually transitioning rooms in schools in California. I remember the article was specific to that. I don't remember the article and who wrote it, but you can, it was from some of the content in the Wanderer. But literally transitioning rooms that the parents, they were keeping it from the parents. So Johnny, Sally would come into school. And of course, now they're asking them if they want to do this. And with having all the kids that you have, sure, they're going to be interested, at least somewhat interested, because you're bringing it up. So they'll have them change clothes for that school day. And at the end of the school day, they go back into this transitioning room. I don't remember exactly what it was called, and have them change clothes back so the parents don't know. I mean, what do you say to
See,
that?
that is insane. I'll be honest with you. I would have a fit. And frankly, I think normal people, and this is Democrats, normal people would have
Everybody.
a fit. Like if
Sure.
you told any normal functioning parent that's not insane, Democrat, Republican, that is being permitted,
Right.
they're going to have a fit, rightfully so. And again, we pay taxes too. And I say this to the church, and this is a clarion call. They clearly have an agenda. Any person that thinks otherwise is completely has their head in the sand. They are teaching an ideology, and it goes against the one that I teach in my house. Listen, the last time I checked, I can be Catholic in this country, right? We have a First Amendment. I'm allowed to believe what the Bible teaches. I'm allowed to be Catholic. You're allowed to be a Jew. Jewish people don't believe this. Go into a Brooklyn synagogue and tell those people that your kid can transition. See what they say to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you have every right to believe that. So how dare the state impose themselves on people of faith? And here's the thing, and this is what I say to the Catholic Church, and I've said this to people who we've interviewed with. A, the Catholic education has to be an authentic one. That's very important. B, you see what's going on. A Catholic education should be for everyone. It should be for everyone. When have you ever? I live near an Orthodox Jewish community where I grew up. You never see an Orthodox Jewish kid go to a public school. Ever. I have never seen that in my entire life. And I lived next to an Orthodox Jewish community in Passaic, New Jersey. They take the bus with me. I have a lot of respect for them. They raise good kids. They have good families. They're family driven people. Granted, we don't agree theologically, but I respect them as human beings. Clearly, I think they're good people. Why do we have to subject our families to this? Why? It should be, again, I'll go back to the school, like Catholic schools. Now, again, my kids go to a Catholic school. I'm pretty satisfied with it. Paul, it's expensive. It's
Sure.
not cheap. And high schools, I mean, I don't know what Scranton Prep costs, but I know what St. Peter's Prep costs, which is a Jesuit school near me. It's a fortune. I know what Bergen Catholic costs. I know what Don Bosco costs. It's a fortune.
Yep.
Why do Catholics have to spend? I get it. We don't have religious. It's expensive. But our children are being robbed from us.
Yep.
Like in these schools, there are many good Catholic kids, families. They go to these schools. Frankly, they get indoctrinated. They hear this nonsense. Their peers. I'll be truthful with you, Paul. I take my kids to school like just about every day. I'm working in a hybrid environment from work. I see what the kids dress like in public school. I'll be truthful with you. It's absurd. And I'll tell you this, and I'm not a prude. These girls, they're 15 years old. What they have on, if they're not having sex, they're going to have it soon. What I see that what's on their bodies, how they dress, the culture is a swamp in the public school. It's a swamp. And what's wrong is completely okay. Even outside of this, why do we, people of faith, have to subject our kids, because we don't have, not everyone is an investment banker and can afford to send their kids to a $25,000 a year high school. And to your point, some of those high schools stink from a theology. Why? Yet then we have to send our kid to a school that they're going to tell your son or daughter that it's perfectly legitimate to change your sex, which goes against all scientific method to no end. And then you have people like Tom Moenkowski from New Jersey, who's going to get in your face and basically say to you, oh, you can't even complain. You can't even complain about it. And they're going to show your kid graphic sex of two men having, what are you, crazy?
Well, if you look a little deeper, and I think this Tom Malinowski, I think he's a good example of this. Is if you dig a little deeper in these people that hold these beliefs in at least in our government, our hierarchy, I find the same thing happening in the church. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find like I think he's either under or was under investigation for
correct,
like insider trading, whatever you want to call it. So you figure, you know, we've completely failed our children when, just to bring that example back up, when they're more concerned about my dog getting spayed too early, when but my kids can go through, you know, for example, transition closet or something like that and not tell the parents. I mean, we're really off the rails, and I feel so strongly about if we don't fix the institution of the church, then, you know, I don't think it's going to keep going this direction, because like we're in a time in our nation's history, in the church's history, we should be having the most rigorous debates with both sides right now, because like I said, there's so many good people on the other side that allow this to happen. We should be in a moment in our history like, this is what we're talking about. Like we need to change direction, and we need to have these talks. Now, we're not all going to agree on, you know, what you believe, what I believe, what my neighbor believes, but we need to be having these conversations. Like basically, I guess what you, Joe and Joe, Frontline with Joe and Joe do on the show. Like we need to have these conversations and bring out these facts, because I mean, we're going to find, even you and I that are pretty similarly aligned, we're going to learn stuff too and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I was a little wrong on that. I'm willing to look at the facts and change my position if they're facts, right?
What I think you bring up a good point, and I'll tell you what, I again, we'll go back to the country is as strong as the Catholic Church, and I agree with you, Paul, 100%. I do, and the church is weak. You can't even argue about that. I mean, it just simply is weak. It's weak. I mean, we could look at what just took place in San Francisco. That should have took place. That he's been there 10 years. That's a layup. That's a layup. Like that's not being radical. That's your job, dude.
Yeah.
That's your job. I have a job. If I don't do my job, I get fired. It comes down to that. That's my life. I mean, we all have a job, but it comes down to strengthening the church is, and what you and your wife did, you have 7 kids. That is a radical example of the Catholic faith. We have to live our life like we believe what the church teaches. We really do. Like, if we want to change the church, like, you have to believe and live it. And I'll be honest with you, and does anyone do it perfectly? No, I don't. I'll raise my hand. I am a sinner, a sinner. But I believe everything the church teaches, every single syllable, and I try my best to reach for it. And when I fail, I go to confession sometimes twice a month, at the minimum once a month. We have to live our lives like we believe, and we're not doing that. We're not doing that. I think the best poll and the best like snapshot of your culture is on your street. I always say this. People look to things, look out your window. I live in a town, solidly middle class town. I would say it's two-thirds middle class, 1/3 upper middle class, if I was going to break down my town. I live on a street with retired cops. A state trooper lives across, just to give you an idea, like my neighbors. People don't go to church. They don't see a value in it. That's at the bare minimum. They don't see the value in it. Never mind living the Catholic faith. Tell somebody you don't believe in contraception in polite company. By the way, that's against church teaching, everybody. Whoever's listening to me, some people who are Catholics, some aren't. It's a sin if you're contracepting. If you fix yourself. I remember I just had my 5th kid. I'm in the diner. I ran into some parents of some childhood friends of mine. I love them dearly. I'm with 2 of my kids. They're like, Joe, when are you going to get fixed? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like this, and I laugh, you know what I'm saying? Like you laugh, but like, this is a common theme.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we have to live. If we want to change the church, that's everyone in the pew. Like as well as the priests, as well as the bishops, we have to live what we believe. If we don't, I got news for you people. Nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
Zero. Nothing. Like, we have to live we have to be holy and try to be holy. Love our neighbor, be kind, live modestly, give to the poor, share of our time, share of our treasure, take care of our families, not get divorced, not contracept, not walk along the paths of society, which Catholics, I'll be honest with you, you can't differentiate, Paul, Catholics from everybody else.
Yeah.
That's why I respect Orthodox Jews. At least they know where they stand. Catholics, what are you kidding me? People are Catholic, they just go along with everybody else. They're jumping right off the cliff.
But
that's how I think we change the church.
Right, absolutely. And that goes to my point about what I was talking about with the school system, because I don't think I'm going out on a limb here at all. I would dare say the overwhelming majority of the Catholic schools, they may see it in their textbook, or they may see it in the, whatever document they happen to be looking at. But I guarantee you their teacher's contracepting, for example, or their teacher is, on the fence, at best on the fence with pro-choice and pro-life. And so you have this the example's not there. And this goes to your point. If we don't, as Catholics, live that radical faith, where is the example? Because your kids are going to go out into the community, they're going to go out to school or to college, and they're going to get bombarded with the opposite of what your core beliefs are.
Absolutely.
So it makes it very difficult without that example. And if you can't have your kids around that example, it even makes it harder.
Absolutely. And, ultimately, I say this, I'm going to be 52 next month. And I will say this, Paul, the best decision of my life by far was to practice my faith. I made that decision at 22 years old, after I graduated from the University of Scranton, when my life was a mess. A mess. The second best decision was to marry my wife. But how would I have married my wife?
Yeah.
My wife's Catholic. I would not have met my wife if I didn't make that decision. Too many American parents, They prioritize things that don't mean anything. What I mean by that is this: if your kid is the manager of a shop, right, versus your kid is a managing director of Goldman Sachs, but your kid at Goldman Sachs goes to hell, he loses. The goal of life is to go to heaven. And when you prioritize that with your children, it affects every single one of their decisions: who they marry, how they spend their money, how they spend their time, who they associate with, the type of job that they get, the type of lifestyle that they live, how they treat people, how they share. Ultimately, all those things bring you joy. Ultimately, they lead to a good life, they lead to a dignified death, and they lead to heaven. It's the most important thing. Too many Americans think this: everyone goes to heaven. Oh, you're a good guy, Paul. You're good. You're a good guy. You cut your lawn. You're all right. You're going to heaven. Says who?
Yeah. Well, I
You know,
would.
and this is where we get lost. We prioritize crap. You see it on social media. People are taking pictures of pepperoni pizza that they had on friggin' at lunchtime. Who cares? What is the most important thing to guide your kids to this? It's to be honest with you, it's the faith. It
Yeah.
is the faith, and we don't prioritize it. We don't, and it shows. I'll never forget this, Paul. I've said this on the show. I swear. It's Good Friday. It's Good Friday. 3 o'clock service. I'm driving to it with my family in my minivan. And Little League is practicing. It's 3 o'clock on Good Friday. I'll bet you 75%, if not 85% in my town. Those kids are all Catholic.
Yep.
I felt like stopping the van, jumping on top of the van, and being like, it's Good Friday. And then everyone's going to heaven. And here's another thing. Everyone wants their kid to be good. Well, how are you good? God, if you don't have that rudder of God, I got news for you. All bets are off. All bets are off. I don't care. Listen, I've been around the block. That doesn't magically happen like with a kid. Like, you don't magically become good. You don't magically become virtuous. It doesn't work that way. Yet everyone wants their kid to be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you're
then we wonder with the church, in all honesty, like, who's becoming the priests? Who's becoming the bishops? It begins with families.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be honest with you, like your family. You're not a rich guy. Neither am I. I live in a friggin' box, Paul. I drive a car. My car is a 2002 car. People are like, how do you afford 5 kids? Because I drive a 20-year-old car. That's how I afford 5 kids. Yeah. That's the type of example. That's what we have to do. We have to be different. We Catholics, we have to be different. Christ was different. And then we wonder why this crap goes on, why we elect these people and everything's okay. It's not okay. It simply isn't.
Well, you're fortunate that you made that decision to follow your faith in your 20s. It took me, I was a slow learner. It took me till my late 30s to do that. And people don't realize the joy that comes with that. They really don't. I don't think they probably can't see it, because I had to be at, like you said, you were not in a good place. I had to get in a probably far worse place. But you don't realize the joy that comes from, just as an example, confession, which we have in the Catholic Church. So people are missing out. They really are missing out.
I'm glad you bring that up, because people think, you know, something that's so true. To live a life as a disciple of Christ, which simply means you're a follower of Christ, and we're all meant to be that, is not easy. It's not easy. I don't have peace. Paul, I can't even pee in my house. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I can't. I got 2 kids screaming. My kid's sticking his fingers under the door of the bathroom. With that said, though, I sleep. I go to bed. I sleep like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
There is joy. Christ takes nothing from you. Nothing. He only gives to you. You see, it doesn't look good, though. You see, I don't go on fancy vacations. I don't have a fancy house, and I never will. I don't have a fancy car, and you have to live without. But you will have happiness. Your house will be filled with joy. You will laugh, you will sleep, and you will have peace. And that is what God gives you. But we sell ourselves short in this culture. Everyone wants to put the stupid ass picture on Facebook of some stupid ass thing. And frankly, that's why our country's in the sewer. And that's why we have representatives that are bums.
Yeah, but
And it doesn't matter who it is, Republican or Democrat.
could you imagine your life without the craziness of the big family? I mean, it is something, and it's a shame that most people now, especially nowadays, they don't get to be part of that. It is something that people are. I always say you're not a real parent until you've had your third kid, until you're playing zone defense. You're not a real parent then.
Well, it changes the whole deal. I mean, Paul, I got kids sleeping all over my bed. I mean, like it's a nut house. I mean,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it teaches you how to be selfless. And frankly, white martyrdom is the way into heaven. I want to get to this last story because it's important. Because the Democratic governor, and I don't mean to harp on Democrats because the Republicans irk me just as much. I mean, she just happens to be a Democrat, Kathy Hochul. If I mispronounce her name, please forgive me. She called pro-lifers Neanderthals. She called pro-lifers Neanderthals. She recently just signed 6 new laws to protect abortion on demand. Just so people know, if Roe goes out the door, which a lot of people say it's going to this month, by the end of the month, abortion isn't going to go away. You're going to have states that have abortion. You're going to have states that don't have abortion. She's basically cementing that in the state of New York. And she basically tweets, excuse me, not here, not now, not ever, with regard to, being pro-life. And she calls us Neanderthals. I find it interesting, Paul. I really do. Like sometimes I try to put myself in people's place, what they think or why they think this. And ultimately, I've said this, and I'm interested in your opinion because again, you're clearly a person of life. You have 7 kids. I mean, 7 kids. People always assume you have 7 kids. Oh, you must be rich. No, it doesn't work that way. My father said that. He said, poor people have kids. Neither of us are poor, but at the end of the day, we're not like bankrolling, $500,000 a year. Why am I a Neanderthal? Why? Because I have kids? Because I'm open to life? Why? That makes me a not Neanderthal. And it comes down to this, the abortion argument. It's sex. It's sex. It's not about the kid. It's not about your body. It's about I'm interested in your view on this. Honestly, I want to have casual sex. And if a child comes about because of that, and I'm not willing to have that, got to get rid of it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think at the end that was the key. It's the responsibility factor. My wife Kristen was actually doing some research for the Wanderer show we're doing, and she came across a writer in the Wanderer back in 1972. She's a medical doctor, Gloria Heffernan, and she said, after centuries of being treated as objects, women are being presented as a final mechanical, they're being presented a final mechanical insult as a constitutional right. And the strange compulsion of abortion in reality is the ultimate exploitation of women by immature men. And she said, technocrats, generally imbued with myopic sense of social awareness and unable to interpret or control their own sexuality. And this was in 1972, right before Roe. So that goes to what you're talking about, is that laissez-faire, that lack of responsibility. Because really, what does kids do for men? What do kids do I mean, we grew up, right? I mean, you become responsible. You have to. There's no choice. So if you don't have that, that's just another element to this that leads to going back to Biden doing this executive order. I mean, it's all intertwined.
But know what it also comes down to, and this is where like life outside of the Catholic lens doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're a secular person, sacrifice is a naughty word. It's a naughty word. That's how you get into heaven. Christ sacrificed himself. Through the family, we sacrifice. Catholicism gives meaning to sacrifice. It also gives meaning to suffering. Society cannot grasp these things. They simply cannot grasp those ideas. And frankly, like, this is something with kids. People are not interested in that. And frankly, it hurts marriage. What
Sure.
people don't understand, and they, here she is, she's calling us a Neanderthal. Why? Because we want to have kids. Why? Because I want to live a selfless life. That makes me a Neanderthal. That my kids can't have their own room. That they may not have their own car. That they learn to share. That makes me a Neanderthal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ultimately, those families, if you ask me, are the healthiest. They're the healthiest. They're kids that they know what the word no means because life presents it to them. They know what it means to lose because in life we all lose sometimes. They
Sure.
know what it means to share. They have compassion for others. They're not entitled. That's how you have a healthy society. And yet, I'm a Neanderthal. You're a Neanderthal. Your wife, you have 7 kids. What's wrong with that? It's sad. And this is the narrative. This is the narrative of the culture. It's sad. It's
Yeah.
sad. It's sad. And here's the worst part of it. It's not working, Paul. I say this to people all the time, and they don't like when I say it, but I say it anyway. How's it working for you?
Yep.
It's not. It's not working. The sexual revolution has failed America. It's created divorce. It's created children who are wounded because of divorce. It's created suicide with kids under 18. It's increased drug use. It doesn't work.
Well, right. I think the statistics even show that. I don't have them in front of me, but I, y- you're missing out because a healthy marriage with lots of kids and not being, I guess, stressed and worried about contraception not working and the list goes on and on and on and on. It's very, very freeing for a couple, and it's very there's many benefits from that as a couple, a closeness among other things.
Oh, there's no question. But also, I think one of the underlying things that people don't like to talk about, when you contracept, there's a selfishness to that. That is, there's an aspect of a contraception, particularly in a marriage, where I am using you for pleasure. People don't want to say that, but that's exactly what it is. And that will bleed into other aspects of your marriage.
Well,
Yet I'm the Neanderthal.
right, and
No,
that's the
I
other
am
part
not
of a
the Neanderthal. I'm telling you a truth.
that's the
That
other
is the
part of the
truth.
yeah, that's the other part of the abortion too. It's selfishness. If you really whittle it down, it's selfishness. I don't want to be burdened with what we think we're going to be burdened with. I mean, there was an article on today.com, and if you could see, they took 8 fathers that were pro-abortion, and they literally, some of the reasons, abortion has allowed me to live my life and make the choices that I think everyone should make. I mean, these are quotes from this article. First time we got pregnant, we weren't ready. It wasn't easy for us to make this decision. And, I'm the dad, the husband, the brother, and the son, and the friend I am today because my wife and I had the freedom to make choices about our future. So basically, to end the life of their child. So it is, I think selfishness is absolutely part of that at its root.
Paul, we got about a minute to go. We're on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Tell everybody about your podcast, the folks on the Crusade channel, and also the people in our chat room where they could find you and your wife.
Yeah, well, we're pretty excited right now to be on Frontline News, and we're doing a program for the Wanderer News, and it's you have to check out the Wanderer, thewandererpress.com. You can look at the website, get the subscription. Our video is actually on that, but you can stay right here and go to Frontline News and actually see our 15-minute news program. And we've been getting some great feedback from it too. So we're excited about that. And
So all the
thank you
folks,
so much for
oh, of
having
course,
me. 'Cause
Paul, you're
this
great.
was
And give your wife my best. You're always welcome on the show. And all the folks on the Crusade channel, check out Paul and his wife on the Angry Catholic. And once again, Joe and I will be back next Sunday. Paul, you're always welcome. I'm sure you'll be on again.
thank
And
you.
remember, our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. God bless you and have a wonderful week.